Well, that's what, and if they're not known of by the department, they weren't known of by the NRC either. And this is what I
wouldn't take that
Well,
to be true.
well-
The NRC may have known, but
Well-
we certainly weren't told of those.
You certainly can ask them.
Yeah, and I did ask them, and they said they'd get back. It's my understanding, and this, and Tim, then you're gonna get it. I'm sorry.
I'm used to this.
It's
Tony
my,
Buster.
it's my understanding it's what you live to be chair for.
Plus all the other glamour, right?
But it's my understanding, and this bothers me, and I'm sure it bothers you as well, is that here we have arguably the most regulated entity probably on the face of the earth, this industry, and yet there seems to be no one set of master prints that anybody can lay their hands on that shows where every spigot,
Well,
pipe.
you know, I don't know about that. Do you have an answer to that question?
I actually don't have an answer to that question. I mean, there are.
Isn't that a good question, though?
Well, there are
Well-
different blueprints, there are different drawings.
Right.
I don't know if what you're looking for is one drawing that has all the pipes. I think if you had that one drawing, it would be so crowded you couldn't see anything, but I don't know the answer to that, Chairman,
But
so
the-
I'd have to leave that to Entergy to
Okay.
respond to
But
that.
Mr. Chairman, I think the bizarre circumstance is that I don't know whether it's tens or hundreds of people that on the site know this pipe system exists and that it has a program to be evaluated over time. So it's a very bizarre circumstance that the officials that are interacting with the state in multiple cases said they didn't exist, and I'm sure that there are all kinds of people on the site that are well aware that they existed.
Exactly.
So, you know, that's a very bizarre circumstance and leads you to all sorts of, you know, head scratchers of why.
Right.
How could that be? And I can tell you that, you know, one thing that occurs to me is that, you know, when we conducted this audit a couple of years ago, I mean, one possibility is just that perhaps it wasn't, you know, our role with the plant was given the respect that it should have been afforded. And that, you know, if you're not giving it that sort of respect, you can provide information, you may not be as deliberate.
What do you
in
mean by
providing
that? I
information.
don't understand that.
Well, I mean that perhaps if there was more due care to answering the question that we asked, then we would have gotten the right answer.
Well, why wouldn't they give it more respect?
I think
mean,
that,
that's a pretty disrespectful statement that you're putting out there.
Well,
I mean,
I think that,
they disrespect your
Well,
department
that's
that much.
how I see it. I mean, that's
I mean,
how I
wow.
see it. And I think what it is that the nature of the industry is that they're regulated primarily by the NRC, and that is who their focus. They see
Right.
that as the number one priority is to satisfy the NRC, and I think that state roles in these plants are very limited and rare, and we are a rare example of the level of involvement that we have with the facility, either through our department, and problematically so, it's always gonna be limited. I mean, you can't expect, you know, our department of 40 people and one person with a full-time responsibility for the plant operations is gonna be able to know all these things or catch every, you know. So the NRC is primary here, and I think that for people sort of on the operating level, I just think it's sort of part of the culture of the industry. I don't even say that it's just this plant. And, you know, I think what's tragic for them as the operator is that sort of, if you want to call it disrespect or lack of care, has really obviously created far greater problems.
Well, I
That
would
if 2
agree
years
with you.
ago, if they'd given it the consideration that they should have,
Right.
we would have gotten the right answer, we would have conducted the review, and perhaps would have ascertained, you know, what we're considering now,
Right.
dealing with it.
Tim?
So that's a good lead-in. Does the removal of one unnamed loyal employee change your attitude towards the management?
No.
No?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that Mr. Thayer, to me, that's tokenism. You know, Mr. Thayer stated on the record essentially that he wasn't sure and that he would get back to us. And that was, you know, was not followed up. But by no means is he the only person who either stated something that was incorrect or did not handle an inspection process correctly, as I just alluded to, or refused to negotiate a power deal, or didn't come forward to offer some resolution on decommissioning. You know, I'm here to talk about 589 at some point, and you
It's all
know,
part of it.
589, in many respects, looks a lot like what we've been trying to accomplish and what we've laid out before either the Public Service Board in the licensing case, or what we would have liked to have done in concert with the eNexus case. Because at the end of the day, and I've explained this to them, that for this relationship to be in balance, you need, you know, from the company's perspective, they want to continue to operate this plant for an additional 20 years and earn a living. That's what they do. That's fine. And as a corporation, they decided they want to reorganize. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's fine, but it's certainly their prerogative to do so. Those are the things they want out of the relationship. We, out of that relationship, want a value-added power supply to our consumers, to our economy, the jobs that are in the plant, and we want to be assured that the plant is going to have sufficient resources to decommission. And so, like any negotiation, all those variables need to be in balance for both sides to walk away from the table satisfied. And for whatever reason, their approach has been to seek essentially what it is that they seek, and not take into consideration the things that are important to the state of Vermont. And that's too bad. And I think what we're saying now is that on top of what is essentially a very straightforward breach of trust or confidence for this administration is essentially where we draw the line and say something fundamental has got to change here for us. And for Mr. Thayer to simply be reassigned is not what the governor was alluding to. And I think it's one of those we'll know it when we see it sort of things.
Okay.
And reshaping any sort of lobbying arrangement or who's in charge of PR is not the answer.
I got Kurt and then Sarah.
Thanks. I have two questions.
And then
First
Joe.
one is, you said we'll know it when we see it, but is the administration actually laying out some possibilities? I mean, how do we, you've alluded to it, but how do we, you and us, how do we trust them again, since there's a lot of issues here?
Well,
And I have a second one.
yeah, fair enough. Well, first of all, we've gone probably further into saying what we think about how an organization should be run than we ever want to as government or as regulators, quite frankly. And it's really driven more about our concern about Vermont, absolutely more driven about what our concern is for Vermont consumers and the families whose livelihoods are rely on that plant. It's tragic in my mind, and my former economic developer comes out here, that people's livelihoods could be lost because of this sort of, you know, foolishness. And that's fundamentally sad. How do we know it when we see it? You know, for example, it's too late now, but someone at a very high level should have been on the plane the very first day and came up here and stood in front of the public and said, this is our responsibility, this is unacceptable, this is not gonna happen again, and here's what we're doing. That hasn't happened yet.
No, and we've asked for that.
Well, I mean, you know what, you shouldn't even have to.
No.
I mean, I think corporate or organizational crisis management 101 would require that. You know, so, you know, I think the other answer to that, Kurt, further is, I think we're talking about someone or some people who are in a high-level responsibility for Entergy in Vermont that are accountable to Vermont, are here as a voice to us, who also has a direct line to the senior management, the board of directors of Entergy. It's not uncommon, you know. Recently, Fairpoint, this is just one example that, because it's recent, Fairpoint appointed a Vermont president, which they haven't had for a long time. And, you know, so that person is in a position to negotiate between what the state is looking for and to articulate that to their employer and vice versa. And that's how you actually solve problems. And that's